So how have you been?
Um, really blessed. I want to say that the health, I'm more grateful for health the longer I live, and ours has been pretty good. And school is, I feel like I'm moving and doing more, and being more productive with my time with school, and it takes up a lot of time, but I'm less stressed than on less busy weeks. So, um, there's a lot to be grateful for, and then being able to help out in my communities of worship at church or at synagogue has been a blessing. Helping out with the college group, the post-college group. Um, I'm thinking of all the ways that it'd be great to have a men's ministry breakfast at some point, and how we can get that back off the ground.
Yeah,
I'm starting to get to like busy levels that approach something close to James Beasley level. So.
Well, you got to start staying up to midnight for that.
It sounds like you're well on your way, Ross.
It does. It does.
We all try. We all try to reach for the impossible dream.
Welcome to the Word Lover Podcast, a place where biblical truth meets everyday life, where we aren't afraid to ask the questions we're really thinking, and where we passionately love Jesus Christ. I'm your host, James Beasley.
So, if you don't mind, can you tell us what do you actually do for a living? I know you said for school, but for class, you teach history, correct?
Right. I teach social studies to 7th graders, and then I get the blessing of being able to teach or advise really student council, our student government organization at school for the last 6 years. And then I also, because we work at a magnet specific school in downtown Raleigh called Moore Square, we get to teach elective classes. So over the course of the last several years, I've been able to teach some of my favorites like Sports Fever or Mythology or Science Fiction or Days of Nights, which is a medieval studies that I got my master's in from NC State, or currently detective novels, or even Meet Charles Dickens. And there's a lot of elective classes I really enjoy teaching.
You sound like a really interesting guy, Ross. I'd really like to get to know you.
Well, I mean, I'm grateful that we've met in person as well as remotely, and that was a great evening. I want to say this correctly: American Heritage Dance,
Yes.
Heritage Girls.
Yeah,
American Heritage Girls spring dance. I can't remember what ball or dance. I can't remember what they called it.
Yeah. But expiration date's gone, quite a while. So remaking your acquaintance would be a pleasure for me too. I feel like everyone has, once you crack the surface, you find all these really interesting idiosyncrasies and talents and interests that people have. And I'm talking to two guys right here who have that in spades. This podcast, which I have had the privilege of listening to.
I'm sorry, Ross. I am sorry.
But now you had the privilege to listen to, but now you also have the privilege of guest hosting because of the wonderful, I guess, topic we're discussing tonight. I have the gurus of comics with me.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Well, I definitely wouldn't go that far.
I mean, I've seen your a couple your presentations like on Captain America, Ross. Is very impressive. And somehow I wandered across a D&D, like a satire thing. Was that you as well?
Yes. Yeah,
that was, I like that. I watched that. I don't know. I stumbled on it was on your channel and I just watched it and I'm like, wow, that's really creative.
I am privileged to have a camera and some video editing software that my wife is my hookup. She's my pusher when it comes to proper technology. And then I also have a brother-in-law who is a fantastic videographer and YouTuber. So I get to mooch off of other people's knowledge and know-how, and then I look good. My wife designed that Captain America outfit. So that's the difference between like the low-end nerds, of which I number. You get to increase your experience level for sure.
So you definitely leveled up.
Yes,
So, can I ask you, have you ever been to a Comic-Con, Ross?
I have. I've been to two of them in my life, so I'm sure that's peanuts compared to some real
Oh yeah.
superhero fans. I get to reverse the question, Joshua and James. Have you guys frequented many Comic Cons?
I've only
Well,
been to
uh,
two as well.
Hmm.
And if I would have known earlier in life, I would have been, I would have been addicted to it and been
Yeah.
right there every time I saw one. But
I have yet to experience that.
it's a whole nother crazy. And there's different levels of investment into it as well. Like you can go full on crazy and do the cosplay and buy admission to every event that they hold on the at the center. Like it is just, but it's so wonderful because if you enjoy comics at all, you walk in there and your head's on a swivel looking at all these different characters and heroes, and
Oh yeah.
it's really cool.
Yeah, definitely the pleasure of dressing up, acting out a part, giving homage to some favorite inspiration of yours is, I find the ancillary pleasure of going to a Comic Con where you get to see so much creativity that people have poured into their outfits or their face paint or their um, acting talent. When you walk around, and you see Treant from, am I getting that right? The Ents, sorry, when you see an Ent from Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
or someone who probably has the weight of a small child on their head based on their costume helmet. That's real dedication there.
Yeah, you don't know what fandom is until you've walked around in sheet metal chafing for a couple hours. That's
True.
dedication.
Yeah, yeah. So I find there is a growing movement who find levels of religion and institutionalization to be intimidating, but respect and fascination with something beyond the ken of human beings, mainly superpowers, good versus evil in comic books, trying to redefine what reality is in terms of the supernatural,
Yeah.
supernatural. Uh, that is absolutely growing as a money making industry, and just in terms of its place in pop culture. And I feel like that's not necessarily at all a rival to religion or to faith. I think that it comes from the same well, and people have definitely found their way toward the healthy topic of God and how to live an upright life through comic books, just as easily as you can turn away from those things through comics.
I think that is a very bold statement that James is going to challenge right now. He thinks
Sweet.
he thinks it's of the devil.
I, for the record, I've never said it is. No, I was one of the things that spurred this on was I love watching the Marvel movies and all that stuff too, but it's just like I just can't get away from this idea that how a lot of these are, it's like painting humanity against God, because a lot of the enemy people is this unforeseen being who controls everything and wants to manipulate things, and everybody's fighting against fate. But that's why I brought that up. So it's almost like is how much of this is like a spin on mythology,
Hmm.
or is it more just the basic desire of mankind to rebel against God and paint God as the evil, genie in the sky?
Well, it's funny you asked that because if you follow like the actual story, the overarching, I guess 616 is the main Earth.
Right.
There's a character called Yahweh, and
That's interesting.
he's based on the Abrahamic God. Like he has all the different like omnipotence, and like there's another character too. I can't never remember his name. He's called the one above all.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually a creation story tied to these characters, But also,
Well,
as you're saying, mythology part. I mean, there's Thor in there.
yeah,
There's Hercules.
you
Like
know,
there's all of them kind of tied together. But I think that these characters, like whether stated or they believe or whatever their faith might be based on, they still acknowledge that there is the one above all. Does that make sense?
yeah, they keep pointing to another being, or like in the have you watched the Loki
Yeah.
series?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, have you seen that, Josh?
Do they talk about God?
They actually talk about a what do they call them? I can't remember what they call the beings that controlled everything that had to keep all the timelines in
The
order.
Celestials?
The Celestials, but then they were a group of three
Hmm.
beings, but it turned out that they really weren't three; they were one
Yeah.
because the three were just like robotic something there to make it look like it, and it's just this one weird crazy guy and this sort of anticlimactic if you ask me for the Loki thing, but
Yeah. The I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I thought it was interesting. You said that the number or the Earth was called 616.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
not 666, James.
No, that's interesting though. Some of the earliest manuscripts of Revelation don't have the mark of the beast as 666. It has it as 616.
Oh, well, there it is.
Yeah,
I guess we
I
can
was like,
wrap this one
oh,
up, boys.
I thought that was. I just thought it was interesting.
Well, yeah, it's the one above all. He's like the supreme being, and he's actually one of his aliases is the living tribunal. Like it's there's so many. I mean, it points to God, but it just the way I don't know that I think he's been defeated by some random character. He might have been defeated by Thanos or something.
Okay.
But I what do you do with something like that then? Because it's not like written parallel to the Bible. Is it still beneficial?
Or, yeah, that's a good question. Um, you can take it away, Ross.
And there's so many things I feel like deserve a preface with this debate. It's like, when you hear my middle schoolers talk about DC or Marvel, which is better, and you want to pull back the veil and say like, hey guys, so many writers and artists have written for both Marvel and DC. They have you can have a huge database to show how one just borrows a character or a theme or a story plot from the other. You're drinking from the same water here. It's similar to the origins of rock and roll versus rap, which was a big debate in the '90s. And the same way, I feel like with comic books, for sure, there is reason to have this conversation with your child when it comes to, is this healthy, in terms of exploring your faith, in terms of letting everything that you read become a part of your way of life and your mentality. But it's helpful to remember when we take these matters really seriously, comic books are some radically silly newspaper print that came out in the 1930s, basically, and were made to sell propaganda during World War II. And since that time, they have fit the mold of whatever culture has required of them while still preserving this main function of, selling papers, making money. That's the core issue. So I know oftentimes when I'm talking to my dad or, this generation, the mentality is like, well, clearly this is used by the left, we'll say, in order to dissuade youth from loving things that are healthy, like our country and our God, let's say, and is now like fully in the hands of some demonic element. And no question, there are factors involved that are aspiritual or just downright anti biblical, and that does seem to be more prevalent than the opposite. I would say that in this day and age, we have comic books being used for themes that don't particularly help someone get to a biblical worldview, but to lump the whole comic book industry or even all of the MCU is it's trying to say that religion is harmful or helpful, and really that's where the nitpickers come in handy, because you can definitely turn toward so many thousands of examples to say this comic book definitely does portray the idea of God or living a righteous life that may be in keeping with the Ten Commandments and following what Jesus would say is fairly conducive
choosing,
to it.
yeah, choosing to do what's right, no matter how hard it is or what the
Mhm.
cost.
Yeah, yeah, I love me some Captain America 2, Winter Soldier. It's not freedom, it's fear, and we have to fight against that. That could definitely be applied to a sermon, any day of the week.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're looking at the way comics have manifested in the last 10 years or so, and movies, I think going through it with the fine tooth comb is a useful skill, especially when giving it to a younger generation who are formative and require a good conversation, just like any entertainment industry. Talk it through with them and read it with them. Um, can't go wrong if you're able to talk about these themes as they're reading it.
That is, yeah, that's a good way to put it too. I mean, there everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial, right? So we have to be able to discern and evaluate the thing, and in order to do that, you actually have to read it. You can't, you know, there's so many Christians that are they're anti art on any degree, and there's the other side that is just give me everything. But God gives us a spirit of discernment to like to do our own research and to figure these things out. Like he wants us to have these experiences. Like he created us in his own image, and he wants us to have be able to enjoy things. And I there's such a beauty to the way like the panels are written, even way back when. You're talking about when they came back to when they were fighting the first war and whatnot. Like that was such an awesome thing to be able to have that and to follow along with these stories and stuff, and see it unfold right in front of your eyes. And it's just gotten to a point now where you really do have to you have to kind of get one or two of them and be like, I don't know where, once the true heart of something's revealed, you have a choice to make. And there's a lot of garbage out there too, so to put it one way.
I do feel like giving some props to comic books. I mean, nowadays I will be hard pressed to purchase new issues. They're just expensive, and frequently I don't find the time to read them as much. And I know when most people think about comics, I think James, they're with you here. It's like the MCU movies, if they're desperate, the Justice League, DC universe. But with the old school comics that I really dig into, these are like the 1938 Superman breaks out in Action Comics, or Batman gets his own in 1940, or my favorite, Captain America that same year. You can find for sure some amazing themes that tie in with biblical antecedents because it was fresh on the minds of those who wrote it. When you look at the roots of comic books, I enjoy looking at the two teenage, Jewish guys who, their parents fresh off the boat from Eastern Europe where they escaped persecution, and they come up with this guy of an Ubermensch of a Superman, which is a defender and a hero, otherworldly, who is able to fight against great evil the way that they can't, who can take on supernatural evil from their perspective, against Nazis and fascists, and who is sent by an otherworldly father to this distant world that is largely unempowered to be their protector. And you can make a Christological argument of Superman from this origin story, or you could very much make it as a Moses allegory where, infant sent off in a tiny vessel to escape certain death in order to bring truth and hope to a people much in need of it. This is not, I'm the millionth person to make this connection, but those aren't the only ones. You got, clear examples in even Wonder Woman and Batman over the ages who have received their own religious coming of faith story, and you could make the argument that, you know, the gospel according to superheroes, which is an actual book, and I'd actually strongly recommend it, is good reading for anyone who wants to see. What was it? There's a actor who I think even came to faith from reading comic books. His name was Oropeza, BJ Oropeza, and he wrote The Gospel According to Superheroes. And in it, he describes how in 1968, Silver Surfer is the emissary of Galactus, who just eats up planets. He is their doom, this supernatural force. And Silver Surfer comes to Earth to claim it as Galactus's next meal, but instead encounters the Thing's girlfriend at the time, who says that you can't use Earth in this way. There's this divine spark in all humans, and they are worth the saving. And so Silver Surfer fights against Galactus on behalf of humans, but for that he has to be cast down to Earth, and he can't leave the planet. He's basically, you know, planet tied, just like humans are. And that was the story that got Oropeza, you know, tied to the gospel and Christ. So, I mean, the arguments are there. It's just that if you're likely to read a comic book nowadays, you're going to find themes that, for those who are easily affronted, will have no problem getting offended and presuming that all comic books everywhere are like that. And that would be unfortunate for all of those comics that have some.
Well, there's I mean, one of the questions that was posed in the text that I got was talking about, you know, how the industry has changed. And did you mean, is it like a business, or did you mean as like the consuming side of it, like what we take on as far as like the morals of it and whatnot? Is how would you frame that question?
Are you asking James or myself?
I'm asking James. Are you the one that asked it, James?
I don't remember asking that one.
Oh, well, yeah,
maybe that's what you had on your mind, but
no, I just feel like comics as a whole will reflect whatever's going on in the culture anyway.
Yeah,
and
I definitely agree with that statement. And it seems like they used to be a lot more, you could say, moral leaning, and today, not that I could speak from actual comic books, because of course what I know about comics is through the movies, because Josh tells me like, oh, they don't screw that character up. I was like, well, it's the first time I'll see the character, so I don't know.
Oh man.
But it seems like they're leaning to put like you said, Ross, now in today's time they are pushing more of another agenda, but that's not necessarily the comic books. That's you know, I guess the entertainment industry today, not necessarily them.
It's a big juggernaut, pun intended.
I think you're right that if I understand the term correctly, pluralism is a lot more active in comic books than, say, a Christian perspective, for sure. Or oftentimes you can say a monotheist or Christian perspective is co-opted for some bigger audience. Sometimes it's just downright anti-biblical. But I would say as a film industry, that's why there's such a discrepancy between the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the comic book industry in general. There is a cycle. So you can see how 1999 Nick Fury sounding guy is then how they interpret it in the movies when Iron Man needs, this Avengers intro. And then sure enough, because it's so popular in the movies, they then feed around back to the comics, and Nick Fury becomes a black man in the comics, and they just explain it through some, his Nick Fury's son is now inheriting it, and so they have some justification for it.
Why do they have to do that, Ross?
It sells. I mean, it's something as simple as like it's green and it flaps in the wind and people want it. I remember when Captain America died at the end of Civil War in the comics, not the Captain America 3 movie. Um, and this made national news. Like you could actually see on Fox News people talking about the death of Captain America. And for people who didn't follow the comics, but who just knew of him in pop culture, this was a greater travesty. It's like when Captain America says these immortally stupid words, "Hail Hydra,"
Oh,
and is revealed to be, a Hydra agent when reality itself changes because of the cosmic cube, which is a stupid story. Um, like people only get the little sound bite and they assume, okay, so they're corrupting this character or they're killing off this character. This means something deeper than just ratings. This is clearly an attack on America itself. And I remember having this conversation with family members,
oh my.
rather than seeing it for what it is, which is we would like more money. We are making the storyline to sell more comics, and it works. It was the same darn story with the death of Superman in 1993, or it virtually every storyline is not meant to further a political agenda so much as it is to widen the audience who will purchase these books. And we forget that sometimes.
Well, I think the industry, like, they're not doing a very good job. I mean, you can get a digital copy of basically any book you want, but I don't know that they're catering to a crowd that almost they care. They're screaming about things that they want, but then when the changes happen, there's no support for it. It's like they're messing with something that they could care less about. And there's so many of these
the wrong way, man.
there's so many of these comic books, like the New 52. DC rebooted basically the entire universe, and it was so they could kind of have a malleable beginning for whatever character they wanted. And they did all these things to cater to different groups that really, like, if you look at the sales of some of these books, they're just not selling. And so they kind of ruined it for the real fans out there. And it's very disappointing. And I some of the content of a comic book can be like, I can appreciate even if it's written poorly, if the art is good, right? But if if the whole thing is just, you can tell that they're a trajectory to try to like indoctrinate or do whatever. It is such a wash for me, and it's so disappointing.
How the Superman died, but then didn't he resurrect too?
He did. Yeah.
Everybody dies, James. Everybody dies.
Everybody dies, but not everybody gets resurrected.
I'm in the middle of reading about the death of Doctor Strange, which I don't know how that works, because
you can't do that because his next movie hasn't come out yet.
I want to say every Marvel character has died at least once. I mean, I'm sure there are some exceptions to that, but New 52, Batman dies at the very end or start of the series. Of course, Superman's was really famous, one of the most hot selling comic book series ever. But people will buy it if the character is dead, and if you can pull that off 3 times a year, then your ratings go up. And I'm not saying that as in it's all just about the money. It's a more exciting story and storyline if it's life and death stakes every time.
It sounds like you need to get in on the business side of this, Ross. You got it figured out.
Yeah, it's a revelation.
He's dead. He's dead. She dies.
But it also sounds like there's another parallel or comparison that's going on there. That this continual death and in order to sell things, but is that also not likening it to like Canaanite or Mesopotamian deities who were continually died and resurrected? Or it's like, as what the connection I would see is, Batman has, was it Gotham? Superman has Metropolis. You have all these superheroes pretty much having a town or a location. And it's like, well, when you read about mythology and all this other kind of stuff, you have all these deities given designated areas or cities or clans or tribes, and it's like, is this really just morphing this same paganistic idea and getting people comfortable with it in like a larger scheme. Say, hey, we're going to put color and like pictures and movies and let's get everybody like desensitized to this kind of way of thinking.
I like your thoughts. I would say instead of there is some kind of plan in place to uh, corrupt the people unknowingly into returning to a state where Baal has, possession of this town and Ashtoreth is going to be worshipped in this city. It's more of human beings being tribalistic by nature. And so that is what gives fuel to some regions, let's say Athens choosing Athena as their patron goddess, and something else in Rome choosing, Mars. Uh, Human beings do this with virtually everything, which is why in our city we have the Hurricanes, but in Vancouver they've got a different sports team, and we like to claim a certain symbol or animal or
People do tend to worship those things.
I would agree, yeah, and maybe it's like a certain beer or a certain industry or entertainment. That, yeah, I think you're onto something, but I think it's much more indicative of human nature, regardless of what we worship. Um, I mean, patron saints, same
Oh,
story in medieval Europe, and even today. Based on where you go, you will see relics and worship given to the personality or cause of that particular place. That's hard to remove from the human being, even from the religious Christian human being.
religion almost makes it more acceptable.
Well, so I've got two questions, but the first one I wanted to ask both of you guys on the back of the other question that James kind of posed. What are your favorite superheroes? What's your top three? How about that?
It's very, very interesting.
Yes, you're going to show your whole hand here, Ross. So make sure it's good.
it's it's an open book here.
Yeah, I could probably guess one for Ross. For myself, I be I like Spider Man and I like Batman, Superman, and then I don't know. I kind of I guess grew up with those three, and I guess I would say I don't know if I could pick a favorite, but I guess it might have to be Spider Man. Just
That was
because
also Stan Lee's favorite, by the way.
was it?
Yep.
Spider-Man was his
Just because
favorite.
he has a lot of pressure, and he's usually introduced. He's young, so he's got a lot of pressure being young and always, no matter what's going on, which is what I love about the older stuff. Some of the newer stuff they make like worse or more, like bad decisions intentionally or whatever. But in the older stuff, they would bad things would happen, but they would still do the right thing at all time at all cost. And I love that story and that power that this stuff does have. These the comics and the stories have, especially with kids. It instills this ideal that even if you think the odds are insurmountable, you can still find it with the power to go forward and do the right thing.
Do anything through Christ who strengthens me.
Yes, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I know, Josh, you're not a slacker when it comes to comics, so I'm looking forward to hearing your answer too to the same question. But yeah, I mean, what a surprise! My answer is Jesus, Jesus, and Jesus as my top superheroes.
This guy.
Sorry, right. Since this is not Sunday
I
school,
love it.
Captain America is always number one. And then in terms of very easily recognizable superheroes, I would say Batman and then Superman are the other um, representatives of justice and the differing styles, but the same pursuit of making good in a world that is prone to evil. There's a lot of other superheroes I would love to give their due that I've really enjoyed in the past, and those are some of those names are so esoteric it's probably not worth mentioning. But oftentimes you just connect with the character and you read their comic until their comic series ends, and
Until they die.
it's a good, like, some of those are the best ones because they don't rely upon this longevity where the writers themselves are writing a story, including details that were already covered before they were even born, right? Because Superman by now is over 83 years old as a comic book. And his origin story has been rewritten so many times.
Right.
Batman argues to one celestial figure that God is dead. And a lot of the fans are like, how could Batman be an atheist and argue that God is dead or there is no God, when he's already met God in like issue 141 from 1980, whatever it is. Like
That's
that's the problem with comics.
That's because Batman's humanistic. He presents the human, what do you call it, the secular humanistic mentality of humanity. I could do this in my own strength and ingenuity, right, Josh?
Yeah.
You give Batman enough time and he can beat anybody. I mean, that's a proven fact.
Batman is pretty awesome.
No, no argument there.
Yeah.
Josh, what about you?
I was gonna say Batman's got to be my all time. I liked him before he was cool, and there's so many different ways. If you don't like this Batman, you can read this one and you'll find what you're looking for. But just the way that there's so much mystery behind him, and he wrestles with so many things, and I feel like, you relate to the characters that you like the most and follow these storylines, and there's just so many times that he's questioned different things, and he took these steps to find out, or he was growing himself to be who he needed to be, and I just find that so amazing. And there's so many guys are so good at it. But yeah, Batman, he's got to be, he's top tier. And then I like some B-listers like Moon Knight. He's very.
I was hoping somebody would mention that.
He's very fascinating. But my hang up is, he's the Fist of Khonshu, which is the Egyptian moon god. But I'm reading the current series, and there's several times where he questions, like, his father was a Jewish rabbi, and he's questioning his choices, and he's like, he's I think the last where we left off in the last issue, he's really considering, the way he grew up and the religion that his father had and all these different things. And I don't know. I mean, he's the Fist of Khonshu, so it is what it is. But he wrestles with these things too. He's like Batman in a sense, but he's just crazier, and he's willing to kill people, which that might not be the best thing, but that's
the new movie coming out, isn't it?
And that's what scares me, is that the character that I fall in love, and I don't want to be like a gatekeeper or any of that type of person that's like, oh, I got to fold my arms because they didn't get this detail right. But they blow it so far out of anything close to what the target should be. It's just, and that's what I like. Honestly, I haven't watched a lot of the newer Marvel movies, like the Eternals I haven't seen, or Black Widow. And it's not because I'm so much of a purist. It's just they missed there's this big target that just can't seem to even come close to, because they are catering to a different audience. But
that's because they're pushing an agenda. They're not caring to get the details right.
Taskmaster, he's one of my favorite. He's not my top three, but yeah, he's so awesome. I love his whole, most of his stories too. Like some of the groups he's part of. I'm trying to think of, it's called, what is it? The Thunderbolts. When he's in the Thunderbolts, that's a very good run. But he actually, when he fights Moon Knight, he doesn't like to copy Moon Knight, because that's what he does, is he copies whoever's style he's fighting. But he doesn't like to do that with Moon Knight, because Moon Knight will take a punch. Like, Moon Knight's kind of addicted to the pain and the adrenaline of it, and I always thought that was funny. But I'm sorry. Taskmaster, in the Black Widow movie, I saw the trailer and I'm like, no, and I haven't even watched it, but yeah.
So Taskmaster is the dad, right?
No, that's Red Guardian, I think you're talking
Guardian.
about. I've not seen the movie, so I don't know. You tell me, James.
What? I can't hear you
You
on my
gotta
phone.
you gotta take that.
I am not. I will put it on silent and send him to
And then
voicemail.
Taskmaster, he wasn't my top three, so Daredevil would be another one. And he's got he's got his Catholic faith too, and it's debatable how overt the comics are, if you will,
Yeah.
but he certainly acknowledges God, and he's the struggles that he has too, and just I don't know. That's
He
what
does that in the movies too.
the show was very good. That was a very good portrayal of Daredevil, I thought, and I think that he's going to be included in the MCU moving forward.
Well, he already has been in the
Yeah, he was in
latest
Spider-Man
movie.
Yep.
Yep.
And I kind of got a little excited when I saw him in there for he was only in there for 10 seconds, but I'm like, oh,
Yeah, it's very, very, very short.
Yeah. It's all. I mean, and that is reaching out to specific demographics. The agenda is we want to pull in these people who really like the Netflix shows and who relate to this form of Marvel cinematic fanfare, who like the grittier, darker stuff than the MCU is known for.
As a interesting, I want to just bring up a little, stir the pot a little
Sure.
bit. I noticed Josh mentioned something about Batman. If you don't like Batman in this comic, you can just go to another comic and read them. And what struck in my mind when you said that, that's what I've been thinking about the whole time. Was that's what we say about Jesus today. If you don't like Jesus in this church, you just go to this next church.
absolutely.
You just whatever you can get Oprah's Jesus or whoever's Jesus, and as long as it makes you feel good.
Well, it's like Superman as well. I mean, right now the Superman series has the son of Superman. His name's John Kent or whatever, and he's bisexual. And so the character has changed dramatically from the beacon of hope that Superman was, in a sense of his who he's sexually attracted to. Like I don't even know why that would be included in a character arc, but it is for whatever reason. But that doesn't take away from who Superman is. Like the Superman that Ross grew up with, or the one that that was written back in the 40s. But do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What are you trying to antagonize me for, James? It didn't work, did it?
Comparing Batman to the humanistic idea of Jesus.
I think you hit on a good point, which is why is it that you're reading comics? Why is it that you're attending church, or seeking out any kind of supernatural force in the first place? And for a lot of folks, it is exactly the same, right? It's I want to be inspired. I want to be entertained. I want to belong to a community that is also sharing these interests. I want to be amazed and go to a show or a place where I can sit and ponder of the beyond human ability of this individual. And all of that doesn't necessarily mean that the person is somehow convicted in his heart of the sin, wants to find some kind of covenantal relationship with God. We have a lot of fans of Jesus, not necessarily followers. And I want to say fans, I mean, knowing human nature, that's the majority throughout human history. That is the way of it. And of course, we three are followers. I mean, no question. We're
I'm a disciple.
Yes, or just even better, the top echelon. We've reached that level.
Is that your superhero name?
Yeah, instead of Daredevil, I'm disciple.
Yeah, I mean, we know what chosen team you play for based on your shirt. So clearly, you've enjoyed the fan status there. Mm-hmm. But I think you already mentioned it, and you are absolutely correct. What draws us to superheroes, I talk about this with my students in classic mythology elective class, is the exact same thing that draws us in this world toward specific churches or beliefs, and that is we need to know that there is something out there beyond just normal human doldrums. We have to believe that beyond the world that we see in front of us, there are superpowers, or there's an ever expanding world where there's good versus evil that is going on beyond our sight. And we want to tap into that. We want to belong to that. And so whether it is that someone goes to the temple of Zeus and makes a sacrifice of a bull, or in today's world makes a sacrifice of $12.50 to some theater so that he can wear his Superman regalia and be a devotee there for the latest Man of Steel movie, which is probably not going to be there very good. That is from the same wellspring inside of every human being who's ever lived. And, we give it an entertainment form now. And it's subject to the same flaws where it leaves us empty. There is this desire to stop right before it gets to the serious commitment level. So that if I really wanted to live my life according to truth and justice, or to fight corruption in its forms, like the superheroes that I admire, like Batman, like Captain America, it does require commitment on a level that will be extremely uncomfortable. And the more I want to be like this idealized form of Steve Rogers, if I want to be the man that Steve Rogers expects me to be, I'm naturally going to pursue a path in my life that will get me closer to Jesus. And that means I'm going to see the orphans and the widows and the sick and the alien, and I will be driven to help them. And I will ultimately be prayerfully pursuing a route that will put me in contact with other people who have that same mentality, and they are going to talk about Jesus to me because that's what inspired them. Like that's the natural progression for people who don't just want to sit in comfort. It's just that's a really brave and difficult thing for human beings to do. And most of us never get there unless.
That was absolutely beautiful, Ross. I really enjoyed what you just said. That is probably the best way I've ever heard it put, and I could never utter that out of my simple mind.
We're actually gonna play that 3 times in a row.
You're going on the trailer, Ross. You're going to be out front.
Repeat. Isn't that how what C.S. Lewis was, the mythology and the fanciful ideas and the dreaming or the imagination of humanity, all these ideas that we have point to reality that we couldn't have, but only find its fulfillment in Christ. Yeah. And that's why I think we can't step outside this like MCU atmosphere, because if people along in that desire, people also need that extra step and say, hey, one of the correct or a per avenue channel that because there is a longing that is driving us to our worship, our desire. And some people may never know they need that word. How can people believe if they're not told? And how can they hear without the word of God being preached? So we have to be able to step in and say, all this stuff is cool and fine and fanciful, and it's wonderful, but all of this it's just imaginary. Yeah. But there is a reality that this speaks of, and like you were talking about the whole time, Ross. It's Jesus Christ, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like what you said. Since you mentioned C.S. Lewis, and I'm contractually obligated to mention C.S. Lewis every time I talk for an hour or more, someone who would not normally be welcoming thoughts about a supernatural force in their life might read Till We Have Faces and think about it from a Greco-Roman myth perspective and start to pursue a Christian worldview from that mindset. Or they might read The Great Divorce because they really like dreams and visions, and that's going to get them to think about heaven. Or they'll read the sci-fi trilogy, the Paralandra Out of the Silent Planet storyline, because they really like sci-fi. And I think comic books are subject to that same. I remember reading in 1993 or 4, there was a Hulk comic in which Rick Jones, Hulk's original sidekick, and later on Captain America's sidekick too, he's getting married. And who should show up but Mephisto, who secretly made a deal that, like one of the satanic archetypes in Marvel Comics, made a deal with the bride to give her her heart's desire. And so Mephisto shows up to claim what's his, and Hulk punches Mephisto. And Mephisto is like, "How can this happen? I can't be harmed." And Hulk says, Hulk's raised Catholic, or Bruce Banner was raised Catholic. And it's actually a plot in the story where he says, "We are gathered here in the eyes of God." Like he quotes the pastor who was just giving that part of the sermon, and that's how the devil likened character can be harmed. And I just thought, like, there are ways in which you can see things peek through. Still, like, that might be enough for someone to think, man, maybe I'll check this Jesus thing out. I mean, that's a far shot, that one comic, but Josh, I stepped on your toes. Feel free.
No, that's good. I mean, there's the overt moments in comics that certainly point to God, but then all along, I mean, the baseline is there that there is a creator God in this universe anyway, and so I feel like, there's many of the characters that actually have met him, and been in his, like the DC side of God, his name is called the Presence. And I mean, it's just so, like, these are the highest, supremest, however you want to say it, beings in the world. And I struggle when it is overt almost, because you gotta have to kind of dig a little bit for it. You know what I mean? Because I don't even know why, but like any Christian comics that have ever been produced, they just are terrible. And I don't know, why do you think that is, James?
I couldn't tell you. It can't be because of the content.
Well, it's just, I don't know. It's like it doesn't seem like the stories, right? There's some pretty crazy stories in like Judges and stuff. Like they're super graphic, right?
Yeah.
And even
in Kings.
Yeah, and Kings, or there's foreskins being cut off and thrown at people. I mean, that's just crazy. But the ultimate is Jesus, dying on the cross. Like, that is some graphic stuff, and it doesn't have to be all gratuitous, but in order to tell a real story, sometimes you do that. Like, and I think that's why I like Batman and Moon Knight, because it is gritty and it's kind of dirty, but you kind of sort through. Just because you're exposed to evil doesn't mean you become evil. Sometimes you grow from that exposure. Doesn't mean I need to expose myself to it constantly. No, but I mean, it does do something. If your worldview is that of a Christian, like I'm doing whatever I do for the glory of Christ, then I mean, that's just kind of how you got to look at it. And it, like I said, everything is permissible, but not everything's beneficial. And so you have to have that discernment, in order to figure that out. Like, there's no way I'm going to let my boys, and they would love to read Deadpool. They love Deadpool. And they've never read a single comic book, but he's a Lego character where it's super toned down. He's a funny guy. He's quick,
the merc with the mouth.
Right. He's a quick-witted. He doesn't say any swear words or anything, but they love that portrayal of him. And we'll go to the comic book store and they're like, "Daddy, I want this." I'm like, "No." No. And I debated, even, when we go to Comic-Con or something, surely there's 87 Deadpools there. And I'm like, should I take a picture with him? Sure. I mean, and it can be taken the wrong way in church life, right? If somebody sees that on Facebook or something, but there's so much more there. Like, it's easy to take and pick and choose the bad parts and not understand the whole story that's been written and the trials that the characters have been through to grow. And usually the people that we like are the ones that they sacrifice their life. Like, there's many times, like, Moon Knight's died, or Daredevil, or even Batman has died at the hands of the villain to save whoever it is. And I don't know. It's just crazy. Sorry.
Well, that whole storyline does truly draw you in when somebody is willing to give up everything for another person.
Yeah.
Like,
does.
wait, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then what's the second one?
Love your neighbor as yourself.
So, I mean, all these comic books are just gospel, basically.
Or, I mean, certainly the second one, very, very obtusely the first, and yeah, like, no greater love hath any man than that he would give his life for his friend. That is reinforced again and again. The self-sacrifice. We are sops for it. We're easy prey in terms of really loving that theme. And I wonder sometimes if that's because Western civilization has really taken hold of Jesus's sacrifice, and it cuts us to the heart whenever we see it in a written form, or if it's something much more ingrained in humanity and always has been, pre-Christ, and that's something that God just wrote into our hearts because we're made in His image, and that is a language, regardless of the tongue we speak, that we all understand and are devoted to.
Yeah, I'm sort of drawn to that second remark.
You're what now?
To his second definition or reason, justification, should I say?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess overall, you would rate the comic world, you give it an A+, or he's shaking.
I mean, Ross, is there any comic that you're following at all? Like you kind of said earlier that you're just not that you're not interested, you just don't have the time, or like.
Yeah, as a teacher, I can't in good conscience follow closely any. I'm definitely a backstock kind of guy where I'm filling in old holes. But I will say, to answer James's question, Ray Bradbury once said of books, and he was a lover of books. In Fahrenheit 451, clearly that was his ode, his love poem to literature. But he definitely makes it plain. Books are not good nor bad. They're not some preservation of humanity's records. They're just simply a form, and what you put in them is what matters. The content is truly, it's like a Christian song. What are the words? If it's got a nice beat, it doesn't matter.
Well, we definitely appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and expanding our understanding of this comic world.
My pleasure.
This comic, or should I say the comical world that we live in.
Comical. Very nice, James. Nice touch.
But thank you so much, Ross.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, guys.